Hi, we've been learning about shapes and forms in art class. We've learned that shapes are two-dimensional, they're flat. We can talk about their corners and their sides. And we've learned to use these 2D shapes to construct the 3D forms, like the pictures on the left. And when we talk about forms, we refer to the base of a cube, the faces of a cube. We talk about the edges where the faces meet and the vertices where all of those edges intersect. Today we're going to learn how to take a 2D shape and shade it and create shadows to give the illusion that it has 3 dimensions and also give the illusion that there is perspective, that some parts are close and some parts are far away in your picture. The ones we're going to do today are a sphere and a cube. So we're going to start off with the shape of a circle. I'm going to hold down that circle with my fingers and trace around it by pressing my pencil up against the side of it, and don't let it move. Now I've created a circle. The first thing I have to do is identify where my light's coming from. So just like in the pictures on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm going to identify my light source as a small circle with some lines coming off of it in the top right. So I know the light is shining from that direction. As a matter of fact, I'm going to project some light like that. I'm going to project a light here onto my drawing surface so we can imagine the light being cast from that direction. So as we proceed now, we need to start shading it in. I'm going to shade in the left part of the circle and leave an area. I'm going to draw a really light oval about that big as a white highlight. I'm also going to do the cast shadow on the table as an oval about this big underneath my sphere. So I'm going to start shading my sphere now because I've identified where my light is coming from. As I shade, I am going to make small circles. I'm not pressing down too hard with my pencil. I need to be able to go from very dark along this edge where I began to pretty light up there at that oval where the highlight is. This part that I'm shading right now is called the core shadow. And you can use any kind of pencil to practice this and just get lighter with your pressure as you get closer and closer to the highlight area. It's easy to get lighter if you just press softer. They also make a variety of art pencils in varying hardnesses that allow you to have darker marks when you draw. Some artists call this technique that I'm doing right now, making small circles, as spaghetti coloring because it kind of looks like you have a plate full of spaghetti and all the noodles are tangled up and twisted in loops and O's. So I'm just going around and around, and as I get closer to this part right here, I press lighter and lighter as I go. There are other techniques also. You could use an eraser to lighten it up. You could use a white colored pencil if you're drawing in various colors to change the value. But I'm doing the simplest way I know how because you can practice this anytime, anywhere. All you need is paper and pencil. All right, so the white part over here that I created is called my highlight. That's where the bright light hits my sphere. Now I'm also going to do spaghetti coloring underneath my sphere. The oval is elongated. It gets longer over here because that sphere would be blocking the light in real life. And any object that blocks the light casts a shadow. However, that same light is also casting light onto the table the sphere is sitting on. And so the table is reflecting light. The light that falls here reflects back up on the sphere and bounces down. So the further away you get from the sphere, the lighter the shadow actually gets. The shadow doesn't stay equally dark throughout the whole thing. Now I could shade this for a while and get it much more gradual as it gets gradually darker towards the edge. I could come back here and even this up around the edge and add in some more darkness on this side to make the transition from white to light gray to medium gray to almost black. I could make that transition more stark. But we're going to keep it moving so that you can also try the cube today. So I know the cube has 6 square faces, so I'm going to start with a square. And I need to hold it down with my fingers, and I'm going to draw around it. The trick is don't let it move the whole time that you're doing this, or it's not going to be a perfect square. The next move I'm going to make is going to be a slide. If you look at the cube that is in the picture, you will see that the light is actually coming from the other side. In the picture right here, the light is being cast from the left side. So I'm going to reposition my light and actually bring my light over here to the left side. So that means my light is here. That's my light. And the shadow is going to fall on this side now. By the way, that shadow is called the cast shadow, because that is the shadow the object throws onto the surface it's sitting on. Now that I have my square drawn, I'm going to line it up really carefully, and I'm going to slide it up and over. And I want to try to get this part and this part very even, so I'm estimating. And with that, I'm only going to draw this right angle. I'm going to draw the 90-degree angle that would make 2 of the edges of my cube. It would make this vertical edge and this horizontal edge. Now I'm going to use my square as a ruler. I'm going to use the straight edge of it. Line it up at the end of that line and the end of this line and draw a short line that connects them. It looks like that. I'm going to finish that top face by adding in an edge right here from corner to corner. So I bring that square over. I use the straight edge like a ruler, and I'll add in that edge. Now I've got one more edge to do. And I've constructed my cube. Now the cube and the sphere that we're drawing are opaque. Opaque means light cannot pass through it and you cannot see through that object. So for all intents and purposes, they are wooden models. Wooden models that look a lot like, well, that cube right there. And so if I angle it like this, you can only see 3 faces of this real cube. You can't see through this wooden cube. And depending on how the light falls, the top is going to be the lightest face. This one is going to be medium dark, and the one furthest from the light is going to be pretty dark. So let's go ahead and start shading. My top of my cube, that face is going to be pretty light. So I'm doing the lightest touch I can with my pencil and just going up and down doing spaghetti coloring to shade it in even. Some people also do lines, but as you saw that object that I just showed you, that wooden model of a cube, it's got a lot of texture in it. So when we do spaghetti coloring and there's differences in how light or dark it is, it looks a lot like the texture of that light colored wooden model of a cube. So I'm going to go ahead and color that in pretty light and pretty fast. And then I know the front face that's closest to me is medium. So this one I'm going to press down a little bit harder as I do my spaghetti coloring, and I can also get a little darker as I go further away from the light. By the way, this model of the cube is a bird's eye view. And the reason it's a bird's eye view, of a cube is because you can see the top of it. That means it's like it's sitting on a table and you're up above it, almost like flying like a bird, looking down on that cube. It helps when you're doing spaghetti coloring like this, if once you start and you sort of pick a size of the marks you're making, you get lighter and lighter. Keep your circles about the same size. And then you can work on pressing at the same hardness to get a similar color. I'm actually getting darker and darker as I get away from the light. That's my goal. Alright, I need to make the backside here very dark, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and construct where the shadow is. Since my light is almost coming from the side, my shadow is going to fall pretty much straight out, and that shadow has almost a trapezoid shape. And I'm going to try to keep this angle right here. So I'm going to keep that angle and keep the length of the line. Depending on where the light is, your shadow might fall down like this. You might get the shadow of on this side and this side, but we're going to do a shadow just on that back side. We're going to try to keep the angle. We're going to try to keep that line parallel to the line we've already created. So you might think of it as kind of like another face of the cube down here on the ground. And again, that is my cast shadow. So I need to go ahead and make this side, this face of the cube, pretty dark. So I'm pressing down pretty evenly. Not quite as hard as I can press, but almost as hard as I can press. And continuing with my spaghetti coloring. Now there's other ways of shading. You could shade using straight lines, straight parallel lines. That technique is called hatching. And we're going to try that in an exercise soon. But for right now, I want everybody to try out spaghetti coloring. And the same thing for my cast shadow down here on the ground. It needs spaghetti coloring. And that is my shadow that is being cast by an opaque cube that is blocking the source of light. This is a great exercise to practice in art because all around us in the real world there are shapes and there are objects that use those shapes. Think about a table. It's got a square. A desk is like a rectangular prism. So once you practice with just a basic object, you can find those shapes and you can find those forms in real world objects around us. And if you've already practiced with the cube, it's pretty easy to draw a desk and then think about how it casts a shadow. Because one thing is certain, we can't see anything without light to light it up. And if there's a light lighting an object up, that object is also blocking light and casting a shadow. So if you want your art to look realistic, you also have to practice drawing shadows